We're about to sample the career of a remarkable statistician. Hello, I'm Noel Cressy of the Department of Statistics at Iowa State University. The American Statistical Association has asked my department to make a videotape of the statistician Oscar Kempthorne, who for 42.5 years was professor and distinguished professor at Iowa State University. This taping was made in July 1991 with generous support from friends and alumni of the Statistical Laboratory and Departments of Statistics at Iowa State University. Oscar Kempthorne was born on January 31, 1919 in St. Tudi in Cornwall, England. He won scholarships to Cambridge, where he was a Wrangler, receiving a Bachelor of Arts degree with honours in 1940 and a Master of Arts degree in 1943. Cambridge awarded him the Doctor of Science degree in 1960. From 1941 to 1946, he was at Rothamsted Experimental Station. He joined Iowa State College from Rothamsted in January 1947, initially as an associate professor. He was promoted to Professor of Statistics in 1951 and to Distinguished Professor in Sciences and Humanities in 1964. He is currently Distinguished Professor Emeritus after retirement in 1989. His influential Wiley texts, The Design and Analysis of Experiments, and An Introduction to Genetic Statistics were published in 1952 and 1957, respectively. He is co-author of Probability, Statistics, and Data Analysis, published in 1971, and editor or co-editor of 4 volumes of Proceedings of Conferences he helped to organize. He is sole or joint author of some 140 papers in scientific, particularly statistical journals. Professor Kempthorne was major professor for 42 PhDs and 24 MS students. He has taught courses in design of experiments, genetic statistics, linear models, foundations of statistics, statistical methods, and statistical theory. Professor Kempthorne has served as chair of the statistics section of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, as president of the Eastern North America region of the Biometric Society, and as president of the Institute of Mathematical Statistics. He is a fellow of the American Statistical Association, the Institute of Mathematical Statistics, and the Association for the Advancement of Science, an elected member of the International Statistical Institute, and was named an honorary fellow of the Royal Statistical Society in 1988. You've heard the summary statistics, largely in chronological order. Now, to add the spatial component to Oscar Kempthorne from observation to inference, here is Oscar Kempthorne, or Kemp, as some of us like to call him. Kemp, in the next hour, we're going to touch on many different highlights of your career. Separating the personal from the professional is like unscrambling breakfast eggs. We'd like to hear about both aspects. Let us start in 1928. Your parents were farmers in Cornwall, the Great Depression was approaching, and you were 9 years old. Can you describe for us how this Cornish farm boy ended up as a Cambridge graduate in mathematics 12 years later?
Well, I really did come from a farming family. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and 13 nephews and nieces who are all in farming. So I went to the Church of England, not that that matters very much. Of course, all children, reasonable children on a farm work. So I was involved in animals, birthing of animals, and so on. Milking, which I hated. But then I went to the village school. It was quite a small school. I had a very fine headmaster who encouraged me, who thought I had a little bit of a brain. So I went on scholarship to a grammar school. Okay? And there I discovered mathematics. And mathematics was really beautiful, particularly calculus. So I wanted to go. I had the idea of going to university. I was the only person, the only person from my school who'd gone to Oxford or Cambridge, But somehow or other I got that idea, and the only way to do it was to win scholarships. So I studied like mad. I worked from the age of 14 to 18. I worked harder than I've ever worked. But I made it. So I go to Cambridge. Now, Cambridge is sort of an interesting experience. There were a few excellent lecturers. There was one called Burkill on analysis, and then there was another called Ingham, who was a big guy in the prime number theorem. So, but then I did a lot of mathematical physics and was exposed to people of world class in this, Dirac, Leonard Jones, and so on. Now, I had a course in statistics, rather like an 8-week course out of Hogan Craig, which was given by Wishart. And then Wishart left because of the war. The war was going on then. And then J.O. Irwin gave a 2-term sequence. So, in this sequence, he covered a lot of Fisher stuff. Fisher 1928 in combinatorial statistics and so on. So I had my 3 years there. I should say here, look, you mentioned that I had these degrees.
Yes.
The MA degree from Cambridge is a pure seniority degree that cost, I think, about £10.
I see.
So that has no significance at all. But the other one, the SED, is a little different. So there I am at Cambridge. Now, after Cambridge,
Well, let me just interrupt here, because I'd like to ask you a question about Cambridge, more personal question. When you were at Cambridge, tell us how you fitted in with the boys from aristocratic or rich backgrounds.
Oh, actually, it was interesting. I didn't have a particularly good college, and it was Clare College, which is a small one, and it went in for hunting, shooting, and fishing students. So, but there was a small scholarship crowd, sort of the proletarian scholars, to use whoever's phrase it was, and you know, that went all right, I guess.
So at Cambridge, you tend to interact more with people from your college than people from throughout the university. It's a college system.
It's a college system, but I didn't interact. There was a scholarship crowd at the college.
I see.
And this group sort of hung together.
I see.
But the rest, you know, I had no feeling for the hunting, shooting, fishing crowd and that group. So,
well, in your undergraduate degree, which, as you point out, was your only formal university training, during those 3 years you studied only mathematics.
Only mathematics, yeah.
And the American system, which your 3 children experienced, puts more emphasis on breadth of education. Do you think you left Cambridge well trained in mathematics, but less so in other skills?
I think I was not as well trained in mathematics as I should have been. But as regards the general education, that was all done before I went to Cambridge.
I see.
You know, I had...
In high school?
In high school. I had really read a tremendous amount of literature and stuff like that. So...
So you were well trained in the classics before you really got to Cambridge?
Yes, and I'd done a lot of Latin, for instance.
I see.
And stuff like that.
I'd like to move on to Rothamsted Experimental Station, unless you have something else that you would like to, mention about Cambridge.
The next step is clearly Rothamsted.
Yes.
I did have a really silly job for a few months in the Ministry of Supply, Department of Tank Production, when I was counting the way tanks were being produced.
So this is between Cambridge and Rothamsted?
Yeah, I was there for about 6 months.
I see.
But the main thing I did when I was in that was we arranging group trips to Stratford-on-Avon to see Shakespeare performances. So anyway, I go to Rothamsted, and Yeats was the boss there. He really was the boss, you know, and he said, "Jump." You really jumped.
You asked how high?
Yes.
Yes.
And of course there I was doing helping in biological and agricultural research. I was involved in the analysis of a big farm survey, and Yeats was involved in wartime operations research. He was working under an individual called Solly Zuckerman,
yes,
who's still around, and he's writing. He's a baron now, or Lord Zuckerman. So
well, I wondered if it was a time of statistical revelation for you. What did you learn there about statistics?
Oh, I learned because, you know, I had to consult people with data problems. So, you know, this is where I really learned statistics. And the first year that I was there, I basically studied, did nothing else.
I see.
So, but then, you know, then I started, if you like, performing. And that went on for some years.
So the large amount of your duties were more consulting than actual theoretical research?
Oh, yes. Yes, yes, that's right.
And in agriculture?
And biological and agricultural research.
Yes.
So,
well, I would like to move on to your secondment by the British Foreign Office, but if there's some more things you'd like to say about Rothamsted, please go ahead.
Well, nothing much really. Rothamsted, of course, was the prime agricultural research station of the world. It was known, of course, it was in Britain, part of the British Empire, and the British Empire still existed in a real sense. At that time, it's sort of rather faded now.
Yes.
So, you know, there were lots of very good people there.
Yes.
And
well, how did the war affect your work? Was there any fear that you would lose the war, that Germany would invade England?
well, oh, I guess there was fear.
Did you have that fear?
Not really. I had sort of
You had faith in that England would come
confidence
through.
the Germans would be beaten.
I see.
They had to be beaten.
Yes.
They would be beaten.
Yes.
There was no question about it. It might be tough, but it wasn't so tough on me, you know, because I was reserved to do technical work. I don't know how.
Right.
Somebody had the wisdom to do that.
Right.
So,
Well, I understand that one of your duties at Rothamsted came in the form of this secondment by the British Foreign Office.
oh yes, that was a curious thing.
And that was to help monitor the freeness and fairness of post-war Greek elections.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little about your work there and how that led to a drastic career change for
yes.
you?
Well, you know, this, at the end of the war, or during the war and at the end, the world was polarized between left and right. And Greece was certainly polarized. I forget the names of the groups, but there was a strong left-wing group and a strong centrist right-wing group. And these two groups started fighting. You know, maybe you recall some of the novels of this time. There's one called The Fratricides. And, so the Allies, which really consisted of Britain and the United States, decided to put an army in between these opposing forces.
Mm-hmm.
Then they decided that there would be an election. Then the election should be monitored. So what group should monitor the election? Well, it's sort of obvious that the real monitoring would be by statisticians. That is, how many dead people voted, how many people were prevented from voting, and all that sort of thing. So that was the story. And that was an interesting group because there were, you know, real statisticians there. The thing, that operation was headed by Raymond Jessen, who was a professor here, in statistics, and in that group were Jersey Neyman and Joe Daly and Ed Deming. So
and Oscar Kempthorne.
Oh, I was really just a boy then. So anyhow, it was very pleasant, and so I go back to the election was distressing personally to me because
why was that?
The right wing, centrist right wing, won.
I see.
You know, and so I was this usual young man. If you aren't left wing, there's something wrong with you.
Right.
Okay?
So although you were there to monitor freeness and fairness, you had a private concern that you had hoped that the left would win.
Oh, I'd hoped, but
yes.
but of course, you know, it had to. Well, the idea was to find out what in fact happened. And when we found out,
yes,
I couldn't get out of Greece fast enough. You know, I was sick. Well, the center right wing won.
Yes. And in a fair way, I understand.
Well, in a fair way, yes. Because the you see, the left wing was claiming that there were hundreds of thousands of people hiding in basements and whatever who didn't come out for the election.
I see.
But in fact, you know, they weren't there. And then, of course, when you get down to the end of it, if these people did not have some confidence in the monitoring, then that's too bad. You know, the Allies were doing their best, and it would have been, they would have called it fairly if there had been, you know, dead people voting. That would have been noted, and so on. So that's Greece. Right.
So you got out of Greece and back to Rothamsted. Tell us what happened.
Then when I got back to Rothamsted, the leader of the statistical group, as I've said, was Ray Jessen.
Here at Iowa State.
At Iowa State.
Right.
And there was another one from Iowa State, and they needed staff here. So they, particularly Jessen, I guess, offered me a position here. And I was slow in the uptake, and then they put up some travel money. So eventually I came. I came for 2 years. And that 2 years has extended to
moderately.
Has extended moderately to 45.
Right. So let's move on to those early years in Iowa State.
The early years, yes.
You started work at Iowa State College, now Iowa State University, in January 1947, I believe. Can you tell us a little about your early days in the department, up until, say, your book on experimental design was published in 1952?
Well, it was natural, I guess, that I would teach design of experiments. So that is what I started doing. But then the department lost staff, and really staff went down precipitously. We had two very good people, Mood and Brown, George Brown, but they left, and so I suppose essentially I had to pick up the pieces. So I was teaching linear models and probability out of Cramer.
Right.
And then sort of inference of Neyman Pearson sort of thing.
So you were teaching all the core courses for the graduate program?
There for a year and a half maybe. So anyhow, I had the main interest was design of experiments.
Yes.
And that fitted in very naturally to this school of agriculture.
Yes.
Because this discipline, design of experiments, was appreciated by agricultural research workers.
Yes. I'd like to follow up on that, if I might. I used your design book in a course that I was teaching in Australia. And I don't think I appreciated the corn and hogs examples until I moved to Iowa myself. Doesn't it strike you as rather ironic that your dislike of cleaning out farm sheds led you to Cambridge and then full circle back into the middle of it, although no longer actually cleaning out the sheds?
Well, you see, I wasn't really involved. That was other people were doing that.
Well, let me ask the question more seriously. Do you think your boyhood farming experience helped you in your work at Iowa State?
Oh, there's no question about that, because I, having lived on the farm for, you know, nearly 20 years, I knew what was going on in farming.
Yes.
So I didn't really have to learn anything. You know, the farming here was very much the same as in England, and that was very handy.
Yes, that's an excellent experience.
So, you know, that was that came in to be extremely useful.
I'd like to bring in a little personal side now, if I might. You married Valda in June 1949, I think.
Yes, that's right.
One can't help but notice how informed and interested Val is in your career and in your work. Well, can you tell us more about Val's influence on your career?
Oh, yes. Well, you see, there's a bit of a hiatus in this, that I was married before, but that went kaput,
right,
whatever it is. So, you know, so I met Val, and
was she a graduate student?
She was a graduate student in agricultural economics.
From Australia, I think.
From Australia.
Right.
So here she, of course, agricultural economics was very strong some years before, but its strength had gone somewhat by the time she came here.
Yes.
So, but then she wasn't all that serious a student, I think.
I think she needed some help in statistics, didn't she?
Maybe. Well, anyway, we kept away from statistics.
I see.
But, you know, she has, she knows the whole of my career, and she knows a lot about statistics, you know. And
I think has been a great help to you, both professionally and in the personal life, of course.
Oh, yes.
But as a member of the department, it's always struck me how generous Val has been towards the department, and what a great interest she takes in it. So,
oh, yes. Well, you know, the whole idea is to make the thing go.
Yes.
And, you know, we were here. We wanted this, we both wanted this to be a first-class shop. And I think, you know, this was achieved. So,
well, I actually would like to ask you a little about the shop, because I noticed that you often refer to our statistics operation here as the shop.
The shop.
Having now been here 8 years, I think the description is very apt. But I admit to having been baffled by it at first. Can you explain what you mean by the shop?
Well, it was a full statistical enterprise of teaching, consulting, and research. And these constituent parts respected each other,
yes,
you know, and sort of made it a shop.
Yes.
There was a sort of community of spirit.
Yes, and I think I felt that. But originally when I visited here in 1980, I kept looking for a shop counter and couldn't find one.
Well, I don't know how it came to be. I stumbled into that usage. But anyhow,
I think it's very apt.
It was a good shop.
Yes. Well, what influence do you think the shop has had on the subject of statistics at both a campus, well, at a campus level, a national level, and an international level?
Well, at the campus level, of course, it managed to keep the teaching of statistics, almost all of it, in the department. So statistics had a big stature in the university evaluation. Then, well, as regards the national status, you know,
I think it's fair to say it still has that stature in this day, but perhaps you remember a bigger stature.
Well, I guess, that is sort of an interesting question, because undoubtedly the shop got stature from the existence of Snedeker, who had written this book on statistical methods, which was known all over the world. And of course I knew about it, and that was a reason for coming here. You see, I was going to a place that knew something about statistics. So undoubtedly Snedeker had a tremendous influence in developing this national, international status. On the
at the national level, the shop has trained a great many statisticians, and you personally have trained 42, I think, PhDs. Can you tell us about that impact on statistics in the United States?
Well, it had I think it had great influence on biometrics and the Biometric Society. Though, you see, what's happened is that medical research discovered statistics maybe around 1950 or something. So there are hordes of statisticians coming out of the health sciences and the drug firms and so on. So, there isn't as much of the early work of the shop.
It's more being done now by biostatistics departments, whereas the shop took that responsibility in early days.
I think that's...
I'd like to talk now a little about your first book, The Design and Analysis of Experiments, published by Wiley in 1952. That was an enormous amount of work for you and has been a classic, has been established as a classic. What do you think the message is in that book?
Well, that book is really sort of curious because it gave a decent presentation of linear model theory. And I think it had some status in that respect. But then, I suppose, the big thing that it was pushing was randomization, coming out of Fisher. And, there are all sorts of ironies in this, because Fisher, I believe, didn't really understand randomization.
Why is that?
Well, because he said, well, you must randomize, but then having randomized, you can use Gauss-Markov normal linear model theory. But there's no justification for that. So if you randomize over a finite set, then you don't simulate, in the randomization, you don't simulate sampling from a normal distribution, which is a continuous distribution. So, you see, it's all very curious.
Well, I'm, as you know, interested in the analysis of spatial data, and one thing that I've observed is that he proposed it partly to get rid of spatial correlation. And in fact, on page 64 of Fisher's 1937 book, I'll read you a quote. Fisher said, "After choosing the area, we usually have no guidance beyond the widely verified fact that patches in close proximity are commonly more alike, as judged by the yield of crops, than those which are further apart." What do you think of recent renewed interest in spatial aspects of field trials?
Well, this could well be fertile, but of course there are sort of big difficulties, because one has to determine a model of spatial variation, and there will not be that won't be a standard thing you know.
Well, that requires the skill of the statistician, of the modeler, working in a team with biometricians, I think. It's this role of statistics in agriculture over the years that's been very important for the shop and for you. Do you see other areas where statistics is having or will have a comparable impact?
Well, I guess there's no question about medical research. You see, after all, what goes on in medical research is that people are ill, so one wants an intervention, a pill that will cure it. And so the only thing to do is to do a comparative trial, okay? And, you know, back around 1950, there was some discussion by Bradford Hill as to whether one could use randomized trials for medical research. And, you know, big argument about it. Whereas now, it's, you know, if you don't randomize, you're an idiot.
Do you believe that?
Kempthorne will blow you out of the the hall or whatever.
Yes.
So
what about a notion of restricted randomization, such as it appears in spatial statistics? Well, the idea that you could have treatments to ensure balance of treatments being close to each other, yet randomizing within that restricted class.
Of course, this idea came up in the Latin square design or in randomized blocks. And it's been you know, pushed off and on over the years. Rosemary Bailey in England has been pushing it. But these people who are pushing it, it seems to me, don't really understand the game. They seem to be very comfortable if, to use I shall give a slightly technical thing now, if the expectation of the treatment mean square is equal to the expectation of the error mean square under the null hypothesis.
I think that's called validity.
Well, they put this up for validity, but you see, that's a very weak validity. And you know, one surely needs more than that. And the thing that one needs, you know, is randomization tests.
So distributions rather than simply expectations.
And of course, if one just has two possible randomizations and you use one of them, the only statistical test that's available is one that has size 50%. That's a pretty weak thing. So, okay.
Is there anything more you'd like to say about your work in experimental design? Because I'd like to move on to another large portion of your work, namely genetic statistics.
Well, we have to move on to genetics.
I think we should. Let me preface this question by saying that Ronald Fisher clearly had a very big influence on your design book, and Fisher did a large amount of research in genetics. Tell us about your own work in statistical genetics and Fisher's influence on it.
Yes, well, when I came here, you see, I came to Iowa State. Iowa State was a leader in the world in animal and plant breeding. There was an individual, he's gone now, called Lush, with animal breeding. And then there's an individual who's still alive in plant breeding called Sprague. And so, you know, these had students coming here, all sorts of students from all over the shop, lots of students from Australia, graduate students. These needed statistics, and they needed to understand the role of statistical thinking in their genetic modeling. So it was very natural, you know, that I should. Now, of course, I really got involved in genetics way back in the effort to try to understand Fisher.
I see.
Because he would call on genetic examples all the time with complete freedom.
Right.
So if you couldn't understand a bit of genetics, you were in bad shape. So
I think you taught courses here in statistical genetics.
Yeah, I taught courses until, until 1960, I guess, and then I was teaching too much.
Yes.
And so we got other people in.
Yes.
To do some of that.
Yes. But you consulted with animal breeders and plant breeders?
Yes, but I sort of that stopped somewhat around 1960 because some other people were brought in to deal with that.
Yes.
Though I still go to animal breeding and plant breeding seminars.
Yes.
So,
well, there's a dark side to genetic statistics, and that I call it a dark side. That's the eugenics movement.
Oh, yes.
Now, Ronald Fisher was very involved in the eugenics movement. Can you explain what the eugenics movement was and is, and give us your opinion regarding it?
Well, the eugenics movement started, I suppose, because the quality of nations, in particular Great Britain, I guess, was just going to hell because, people were coming in from all over the world and they did not have, so it was claimed, did not have the intelligence and so on. So something should be done about this. Yes. And Fisher was a big man in this eugenics movement.
Yes.
Now, this outlook has sort of come in and out, okay?
Yes.
And it came up again around 1970 with an individual called Jensen.
Yes.
And he wrote a long thing on the in the Harvard Educational Review.
Yes.
And
what did he write?
Well, the idea was that that something like, with very defective thinking, that 80% of the variation in human abilities, mental abilities, was due to genetics,
I see.
and 20% due to environment.
Yes.
So that's where he came out.
Yes.
But of course, that's that is arrant nonsense. It's epistemologically can't be sustained.
Yes.
They didn't have the data.
Yes.
The only way to establish a causal argument of that sort is by experimentation. And these people somehow did not understand, have any, what for me is a decent understanding of causality. Causality has bugged philosophers for 500 years, I guess.
Longer.
Or longer. And there's a lot of fluff talk in the area. The only notion of causation that can be sustained is causation in the sense of human agency. That is, or in the sense of some agent. So that's why this experimental design really appealed to me, because one does get, in a weak way for sure, one does get at causality. And one doesn't, one can't get it just by sort of looking at data.
I think you've given expert witnesses at court cases on this subject.
I was involved with friend Shockley.
I see.
Friend, the great physicist, Nobel, and so on. And I think it's true that at least there's an ailment of Nobel Prize winners.
Yes.
They think they can understand anything. They can analyze anything. And Shockley was surely doing this. So, he was thinking that if you see correlation, who can infer causation.
Yes.
And his thesis was something like this, that, how shall I put it, that amongst bright people, in bright people, the proportion of white ancestry is such and such, and the proportion of black ancestry is such and such, and very much lower. So, you know, white ancestry causes high intelligence, and he was riding that horse. So they had this court case in Atlanta, and so they called me in as an expert witness against Shockley. My expert witnessing was primarily to the effect that Shockley was incompetent. So anyway, curiously enough, he won his case.
I see.
But he received damages of $1. So he didn't get much out of it.
No.
So
I'd like to ask you about new aspects of statistical genetics and beyond in biometrics. There's a subject that has generated a lot of interest called biotechnology. What do you think what role do you think statistics has to play in this subject?
Well, I think statistics will have a massive role, which I believe the biotechnologists do not understand. The ideas are the ideas of, so I say, classical genetics, 1920 to 1930. That one looked at inheritance, and then, how shall I put it, you know, you look at sons, offspring, and parents, and then they shared certain ailments or deficiencies. Well, and so this led, or certain special attributes, eye color or whatever, and this led to sort of gene mapping. Okay, you know, and of course the techniques for doing this were very limited. But with Watson Crick, then massive development since, people can look at the whole chromosome, or a set of chromosomes, and then someone discovered scissors, things that are called scissors, that chop this up into bits, and then there are techniques, these differ in molecular weight, so one can put this chopped up stuff in a whatever the word is, some sort of jelly, an electric field, starch gel electrophoresis, and one can just sort out the stuff. Then one can pick it up, so to speak, and multiply it. That's the latest thing which I don't understand. There's a great big advance called the polymerase chain reaction, in which one can get a little piece of DNA and one can multiply it a million times. So one has enough stuff to do all sorts of analyses.
There's surely variability in all these processes.
Well, this is
when I see variability, I think immediately of statistics, and I think you think the same.
That's right. Because it seems to me that the people who are working on this don't really understand the complexity, because I think I'm right, I don't know if I've lost a few digits, I think in humans there are 2 billion nucleotide pairs. So, and you know, it's either C, G is one possibility, or A, T is the other, whatever. It doesn't matter what the names are. So this is like a factorial experiment. with 2 billion factors.
Yes.
So, you know, how does one find out this? And but you know, apparently they do find out some things. They've apparently nailed down cystic fibrosis, for instance.
So the signals are fairly strong in the maps that they're making.
So, you know, they are finding out some things.
Yes.
So
can I move on now to a very important topic, and that is statistical inference.
Statistical inference.
Yes. I think it's appropriate that this last part of our conversation be about inference. Can you tell us what inference is and whether statistics is approaching the problem in the right way?
Well, inference, I suppose, tackles questions of this sort. Will I be alive in the year 2000? Now, there is uncertainty on that, and there's variability. So one way of expressing this variability is to bring in probability as frequency calculus. So there we are, you see. Now, of course, in order to use this frequency calculus, one has to have a statistical model, in fact, a stochastic model. Now, what goes on in the world is that the stochastic model is produced out of nowhere.
Yes.
No one, you see, the only way to get an appropriate statistical model or stochastic model is by data analysis. But, you know, the only people who do data analysis are sort of, quote, dirty, unquote, applied statisticians.
Well, I don't actually think that's all that fair.
That's not a fair...
No, I don't think that's a fair comment. I think many things go into the modelling, and a lot of prior thoughts and conceptions about the physics, chemistry or biology of the problem go into it. And in fact, a Bayesian would say when they build their priors, they don't build them from completely, from no knowledge at all. In fact, the mechanism behind the process goes into the building of a prior. It's very important for it.
Well, you know, perhaps you are right. I guess you will forgive my certain skepticism on
I
this.
see.
I've listened to the big guns, you know, Lindley, and I've listened to Savage, the foundations of statistics, which, of course, is nothing about the foundations of statistics at all. You know, there's nothing about data analysis in it. Models come out of thin air. And priors, well, you get priors by introspection. Now that is not much of an approach, so to speak. Well, everybody introspects.
Right. I think you get priors from your experience. I think perhaps a baby is born with a flat prior, and then gradually, as that baby grows, the experience accumulates, and knowledge about processes around them force the priors to become somewhat peaked.
Well, you see, this is the problem with statistics, that it does not approach this matter of inference properly. You know, I bought the Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and so look, there's a ton of stuff in there, but these philosophers are absolutely useless, as far as I'm concerned. There's no point. Well, they don't address any real problems. Okay?
Right.
So
let me follow up on Bayesian statistics, given that we're there. Results from Bayesian statistics seem to differ from results from classical statistics in applications where there is little available information about the process under study. Perhaps a lot of your work has been in data-rich situations where one gets a similar answer regardless of the prior chosen. Do you think that's fair?
You see, because I guess I object to the process of using a prior.
I think you once said you have an axiom in statistics that one should not be a Bayesian.
One should not be a Bayesian.
Right,
Okay?
right.
So, you know.
So it's a philosophical objection?
Well, I suppose it's philosophical,
Yeah.
but you know, I think the field of statistics is failing by not addressing the basic questions.
And
you know, I read the Bayesians, and you know, a prior comes in out of this. You see?
Yes.
And Jeffries, you know, had a bang at trying to find invariant priors, you know, good priors from a mathematical point of view, and he failed. And so the process is wrong.
But how would you perform inference based on just 2 or 3 observations? We're now talking about very data-poor situations.
Well, I guess I'd give up on it. I would give up on it.
But you have, you would then ask the scientist where those 2 or 3 data came from.
Oh, yeah.
One often deals, particularly in exploration, oil exploration, where one datum would cost an enormous amount of money, $1 million.
Yeah.
One often deals with situations where only 2 or 3 data are available. And they certainly don't want to give up on it because they've spent $3 million.
Sure. But then, you see, in that situation, there's a huge richness of physical science knowledge,
Right.
which is brought to bear on it. So, you see, I guess I suspect that the use of the Bayesian process really doesn't matter. You know. But there is no doubt that, you know, in my opinion, statistics is failing, and is failing rather miserably.
Have you thought about how it might recover?
I've been trying for the last 30 years, but haven't had much success.
I see.
I think the end thing is that, see, what we are hoping for, we seem to be hoping for, is a deductive theory.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, this, see, one cannot, somehow there's something inherently wrong in thinking about a deductive theory for inductive processes.
Mm-hmm.
Because in that case, if one could have that,
Mm-hmm.
then everything would be deduction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, you know, there are all sorts of complexities in this.
I'd like to broaden this conversation a little into inference in general. Your third book, Probability, Statistics and Data Analysis by Kempthorne and Folks, treated a number of inference issues from a fresh perspective. What contribution does that book make to inference?
Well, I don't know if it really makes anything. But the idea that is pursued there is to make a differentiation between Neyman-Pearson statistics,
Mm-hmm.
which is the standard thing of the theoretical profession.
Mm-hmm.
Make a distinction between Neyman-Pearson and, I guess, data analysis
Mm-hmm.
inference,
Mm-hmm.
which, I mean, was somewhat Fisherian.
Mm-hmm.
So Fisher was I guess, the greatest data analyst
Of all time.
of all time,
Yes.
I guess.
Okay.
But
Well, one topic I know you've addressed is that our probability models often assume data can take any value on a continuum.
oh yes,
And imprecision of measurement makes this assumption unrealistic. What effect does this have on inference? And what can we do about it?
Well, I don't know. This, you know, I've been bugged about this
Yes.
for 30 years. And, you know, people say, oh, well, Kempthorne is off riding his horse again. I'm still riding it.
Right.
Because, well, take, for instance, fiducial inference, which Fisher thought, apparently, was the answer. But fiducial inference cannot be done with discrete data. So, if all data are discrete,
Right.
then fiducial inference is out.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know...
I'd like to talk a little now about hypothesis testing and significance testing.
oh, yeah, well...
I think this relates to what you were saying about Neyman-Pearson inference. Can you contrast the two and tell us which one we should be using?
Well, the Fisher and Carl Pearson before produced significance tests, okay? And the great one is chi-squared goodness of fit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are all sorts of uncertainties and ambiguities about this. So Neyman and Pearson tried to fix it. And in order to fix it, they produced a theory of testing hypotheses, which is really a theory of accept-reject rules.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me, and that this theory of accept-reject rules just doesn't really address the problem of inference. But then, of course, neither does the Fisherian theory. You know, the models in the well, it's not going to confuse issues here. The Fisherian theory sort of produces a model, but then it tries to obtain a measure of a rational degree of reluctance
Mm-hmm.
towards a hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me that is really what the game is about, rather than, you know, accepting or rejecting.
Mm-hmm.
So...
well, a Bayesian would put a prior on the hypotheses.
yeah.
And then use the posterior probability of the hypothesis being true.
But where does he get the model, parametric model, and where does he get the prior? Now, if you can nail those things down, then one would be in business. Okay?
I think introspection is probably not the whole answer, and we've talked about that just 3 or 4 minutes ago. Well, we've come to the end of what I think is a very interesting hour of discussion with you, Kemp.
Sure.
It's been great fun and enormously interesting. I know that your colleagues, friends and relatives are going to take pleasure from seeing vintage Kempthorne. But equally importantly, those who have only read your written words will surely enjoy and benefit from the extra dimensions that we've seen today. Thank you, Oscar Kempthorne.
Well, and thank you, Noel Cressy, for working on this and making this thing go, because on my own I would not have been able to make it go. So, thank you.